really, I think the product is not necessarily what makes or breaks the solution. It's, marketplaces are very tough. And to your question about investors, like that's one thing we really solve for is who's built marketplaces, because it takes a tremendous amount of creativity in the beginning. You have this chicken and egg problem, they call it the cold start problem, where people come to your site to find housing. And if they come to your site and they don't see anything available, they leave. And people list on your site to find people that are looking. And so if they list on your site and nobody is looking, then they leave, right? So you inherently have to fake one side of the market to attract the other. And then you can pick up that fake to pull the rest in. So it takes a tremendous amount of creativity. It's not just about building a website. And like what we've done, and honestly, day in, day out, a lot of the things that we spend our time thinking about is how do we provide anybody that comes to our site with the most options, so that they tell all their friends, come to this site. And in time, people will list on our site naturally because this is where the demand is.
Ezra, Jacob, thank you for coming on to another episode of the Nickel Up podcast. Longtime friends and reconnecting after a little while. You guys just want to kind of start and tell us what you guys have been up to lately?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have been friends since 2009. We were at summer camp together, Emma Kaufman camp in West Virginia. And the story kind of starts with Jacob, sophomore year. We're at a driving range with our friend Leo. And Jacob's thinking about whether he wants to go back to Michigan or go to Penn State, where he got into Schreier and then ultimately decided to go to Michigan. But I kind of convinced Jacob to come to Penn State so that we could create this product together called The Keeper, which is a phone wallet that solves the problem of lost dorm keys, and started selling it out of our backpacks, got into a couple local bookstores, and then just through basically like sheer persistence, got it into like 800 bookstores across the country. And then, in that process, we had to manage thousands of orders that we were using this Excel spreadsheet, and it just wasn't cutting it. And this is over really 4 years. And at this point, like I was actually at McKinsey, Jacob was at Apple, we had already graduated, and we're still working on Keeper. And it's kind of a funny story where like we're trying to manage this spreadsheet, and McKinsey has this like help desk in the Philippines for like spreadsheets that get out of hand. And so we're like calling the McKinsey help desk to like help us manage these like formulas. Long story short, we had to build some software. And so Jacob really took the lead on building the software that enabled our business to like scale. And the plan was we're going to build this business so that we could support ourselves to start our second business, which is now Ohana. And we've since raised 1.2 million to solve the problem of there's a gap in the middle of the housing market. So basically you can use an Airbnb or a hotel for short-term stays, anything less than a week. And then you can go to Zillow or Apartments.com for 12-month leases, but there's really nothing in the middle. And that's our goal with Ohana. I know I just went on there, but...
No, you're good. You're good. Let's take it back to Keeper to start off. You started that when? It's March 2024 right now. When did you guys start Keeper?
We officially started it August of 2018, and I think it was during that summer. Really the start of it was I was working at the same camp where we met. I was working as lake staff, and I remember it was like rest hour, and I was like on Snapchat on my phone, and I saw this story is actually on Ezra's girlfriend, Kate, her Snapchat story. And it was like Ezra pacing around the room on the phone, and the caption was like Ezra's Shark Tank idea. And I was like, what's this idea? So I called Ezra right away, and he told me about the idea. And I think what stood out about the Keeper idea was that it was something like relatively attainable. It wasn't rocket science, relatively simple problem. Relatively simple product, granted solving a very real problem, but it felt attainable to us at the time. And so pretty quickly, I remember there's this online 3D modeling software. It's kind of like the Google Docs for 3D design. It's called Onshape. And I remember being like on my phone in a hammock at the lake, like trying to like make these Keeper designs on my phone. And not long after, we ended up, finalizing the design, finding a manufacturer in China, and it all came together pretty fast.
Were you guys both entrepreneurial growing up, like prior to that?
Actually, yes. Jacob was a clown for hire. He would make balloon animals.
Yeah, I had I would go to birthday parties. I would like make balloon animals. I do face painting, and I always did the normal like lemonade stands and that type of stuff.
I did lawn care stuff, so
Yeah.
I did that, and then
Shovel some snow. here
shoveled
and
some
there.
snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like when you had that idea and like you were pacing back and forth, did you kind of feel like, oh, like you saw the vision and everything playing out in your head in front of you, like one of those moments?
Well, I think it was kind of like I felt really bored at Penn State, and I felt like, I think this was a lot of fun, and I think we both kind of felt like it would be really exciting to solve a problem. And originally the dream was to be on Shark Tank. It was like, what idea could get us onto Shark Tank? And the kind of windy story with that was we had the idea after watching Shark Tank, created it. Then what changed the game for that business was we applied to this Penn State pitch competition where the grand prize was basically $30,000, and the judges would decide how to allocate that. And this is junior year. I was studying abroad in London. Jacob had gone back to Michigan. We had a buddy at Penn State, and we had to get him onto our team to qualify for this pitch competition. So he qualifies, and then COVID hits, right? And so it was supposed to be in March. It turns out it's in June. It's all remote. Long story short, we painted a vision for how Keeper is very attainable, and how with the $25,000 we could bring it to market and get into 300 bookstores within 18 months. And it was a crazy kind of trajectory to go from no licensing, because this whole business is dependent on being able to put the official logos, right? So we had a plan how to put the official logos, get into the bookstores. The judge for that pitch competition had a product on Shark Tank that was very successful. She got a deal with Barbara Cochran. She saw something in us, awarded us $25,000 out of the $30,000 total. And then, we were able to get a distribution center. We were able to convince the biggest distributor in that industry to take on the product, get the official licensing. And that's what really changed the game. And then the next year, we also applied to Shark Tank, and we were casted on the show, but we got cut last minute. But we Jacob came back to Penn State so we could create the video for it. We'll send you guys the video. You might want to put a clip in.
They filmed an episode with you guys?
We filmed an audition.
Okay.
That got us past a couple rounds.
Sure.
And then we were waiting for here's when you should come out to LA to film. The email never came. They cut us, but.
Was there an event that kind of made you realize that there was a need for this product? You talk about the middle of the market, in the housing market,
For
being
Ohana?
For Ohana being empty. What was the inspiration to start Keeper?
Just
How did you was there an event where you lost your key at camp, or who was losing their keys? What came up with this idea, or was it really just because you wanted to be on Shark Tank?
So the official story is that I was locked out of my dorm room, and Pat Flynn, who because you lived on that floor, was my freshman year roommate. And I'm in the shower. I don't have my key. He comes back from wherever he was, locks the door behind him, and I'm locked out of the dorm room in my towel and my Crocs, carrying the shower caddy, and I have to walk to the commons desk in the cafeteria to get the universal.
That wasn't
key.
close either, because you had to go all the way to Rediford.
Yes. And
Yeah.
as you know, the sorority housing is also at Rediford. So I'm in the dining hall in my towel and Crocs, it was first year of school, super embarrassing. And I wasn't the only one that happened to. Unfortunately, there was a lot of kids that this happened to. So very simple solution. Let's just put it on the back of what kids have with them at all times, their phone. And it ended up being useful. We now sell over 100,000 of these a year.
So you're still turning with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we look at each other sometimes and we're like, thank God for that business, because it just seems to work, and we're scrambling every day to make Ohana work. And now that Keeper is on autopilot, and it feels really good.
What was that light bulb similar moment for Ohana, finding that problem and eventually, executing on it?
Yeah, I think for Ohana, it really wasn't a light bulb moment. I think it was something we experienced over time and had dabbled in over the years, but I don't know, for various concerns of competition and different things, we never really, we were still in school and we had other jobs, so we never really went forward with it. But I had an internship in San Diego, which I got the offer at the end of April. 2021, and started May 17th. So I had like 3 weeks to figure out housing. I was going home for a week, and then I was going to Costa Rica for a week with my family, and then I was going directly from Costa Rica to San Diego. So I didn't really have much of a chance to like go to San Diego. Had never really been there in person, and so it was like, okay, let me get an Airbnb for a week, and then like figure it out. And definitely proved to be a lot more stressful than I anticipated, not just to find a place, but I didn't have any friends there. So I wanted to live with other interns, other young people, and eventually I found somebody off Facebook. He was a bit older. He was a really nice guy, but who wasn't exactly in the same headspace necessarily as I was. And so that was just one of many stories. Ezra was abroad in London. Even moving to a new city and finding a home is very challenging. And for me, like every time I would go on Facebook and scroll through the posts, like I would see so many posts that were people looking for housing. And it was just, it's crazy that like these Facebook groups that are, filled with so much noise, like random like motorcycles for sale and, a lot of like spammy brokers posting like full year leases. Like it's really hard to find a place if you just need it for, 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I feel like I've run into that issue many times. Like, I mean, I've spent a couple of years where I was just kind of a digital nomad, and I have a lot of friends in that space. And like, all of us, like, nope, you don't want to sign a lease. You don't want to sign a 12-month lease. You want to bounce around different spots, or spend 6 months in New York, spend the other 6 months in Miami, right? And building a solution for that, there's definitely a massive market and a massive problem there to solve. So it's cool that you guys have taken that on. To work on.
What was it like, starting this company when you guys were both working, very prestigious 9-to-5 jobs, if you can even call them that? Because you were at Apple, correct?
That's right.
And then you were at McKinsey. So, two of the most famous companies in America. And then you said, screw it. Why?
It was like a long and drawn out process. And I think the honest answer is at least I can only speak for myself. I would not have wanted for that to be my legacy. Like I stayed at McKinsey and I had a prestigious job and then, maybe made some money, but I wouldn't be remembered for anything. And I could be easily like, I was just kind of a cog in a wheel where it wasn't clear to me how the impact of this project was different because I was there. And I think that was really what gave me like this feeling of restlessness. Like my role at this company could be anybody else, and therefore it's not personal. I don't feel like I don't identify with this work, and it just felt like a waste of time. Separately, I think I don't regret having the job. I'm glad I did, and I think it's been helpful in certain ways. But at least now we're probably working just as much. Weeks like this, certainly more. But it's so personal, and when you get a win, even though they're like little wins, they're very personal. And so like getting to meet with the guy who created Zillow and then ultimately convince him to become a shareholder, that was a huge win for us. Raising $1.2 million for this idea that we had, and we had 108 meetings to raise that money, and we got basically 4 yeses. So like that feels like very personal, and you're kind of gonna fail anywhere. You're gonna fail day in, day out in life, but I would just rather have like the successes be really meaningful.
What about you? Thank you. What about you, Jacob?
I think the Keeper experience gave us both a taste of entrepreneurship that not everybody gets when they're young. And so to have ownership, to have the feeling of, having some degree of impact, we got to experience really young. And I think I was even a little bit apprehensive going into the job. And, my boss, asked me like before they gave me the job, they're like, are you sure you really want to do this? And I tried to kind of allay his fears. And, he even kind of joked like, and I explained to him my role was, I was an engineering program manager. So, I kind of made the argument, that there's a lot in common, with being an entrepreneur and being a PM and, managing different teams and all this stuff. And then he kind of joked like, maybe I'll work for you one day. And this was before, they even gave me an official offer. And so, I started in February, and, it was pretty apparent to me, like I love the people I worked with. It was a great job, really grateful for the opportunity. But, I really wanted to be doing something creative, wanting to build something like totally new. And, whereas like, if we weren't doing this, that, that problem might not otherwise be solved. And, I had other friends were raising money and, building companies. And I thought, why can't I do this too? And so we were really lucky, and Ezra and I would call a lot, when we were kind of feeling burnt out and kind of a bit dead on the inside because of work. And for me, ultimately, I was about to sign there was a number of factors, but I was about to sign a 12-month lease, and I was like, you know what, this is not where I want my future to be. So I resigned. I gave 2 months notice, but I resigned, put all my stuff in my car, drove across the country. My brother was kind enough to meet me last minute. He literally flew day off to meet me in Las Vegas, and we just drove over Memorial Day weekend to Ezra's house in Pittsburgh. And I worked for Apple for 2 more months, but after that, the rest is history.
What did you each learn in your roles, at McKinsey and Apple that kind of like made Ohana like a real idea? You said that you utilized McKinsey's, internal Excel teams, and I'm sure that you, you learned a lot in your role at Apple that you've applied to Ohana now. Is there anything that you want to say to people who, want to become an entrepreneur, but do you have advice for them to start with a 9-to-5 as they might learn something from it?
My advice would be, if you want to be an entrepreneur, don't go to McKinsey. I think the reality of the situation is like the work I did at McKinsey does not correlate to the work that I do now day in, day out. And really the reason is at McKinsey, you're provided with a ton of structure, especially when you're starting out. Your boss tells you what to do, and they have a boss that tells them what to do. And it's very easy to just say, if I am an overachiever, I can plug in and like do all the right things and succeed. And it's also very political. Like succeeding at McKinsey is basically synonymous with being liked, which is also relevant for client services. And I think for entrepreneurship, being liked is still a very helpful skill. But whether investors like us or not, we have to deliver real results. And at McKinsey, you don't have to deliver real results. You're making PowerPoint decks. And people will convince themselves that there's all this meaning and what they're doing and whatever, but your output is a PowerPoint deck. And it's very different from what we're doing today. I think really the experience that I draw from is Keeper and creating that product. And, we had all of these unstructured questions, right? Like, will people want the product? We had to answer that question, and we created some samples. We had 800. We gave them to kids. They liked it. Will stores buy it? We had to go into the store and convince them to carry a product that may or may not sell, pay for it from a kid who has never done this before. I mean, literally, I went into a store at Penn State, and she was like, okay, how do I pay you? Like, who should I send the invoice to? And I go, what's an invoice? And she's like, that's me promising to pay you. And so that was like the situation, right? But you just keep going. You go into all the 8 stores. They say no, and then you go back, and then maybe they say yes. And then regardless, I think the biggest learning and why we're able to take on this bigger problem is Keeper wouldn't have happened if we let no be an answer. And so we just continuously let no not be an answer. We kept growing it, and now we sell 20 different products to 800 different bookstores. So it's really a completely different business, much more of a software business. And that's the only thing I think that's true about Keeper and Ohana is you just can't let no be an answer. And I definitely did not learn that from McKinsey.
I think a lot of the attributes that, in my opinion, make us great entrepreneurs also make us really terrible employees. It's just, every day you wake up and it doesn't quite feel right. I don't know. But of course there's a little bit of an inherent resistance to authority and, you wanting to pave your own path and, have the control over your own destiny. And honestly, there was another intern at Apple that I was like, gosh, I wish I could be like him. He was an incredible employee. He was a great job. He really fit the vibe. And for me, it's a bit, I was just, I don't know, you feel like you're being pressured to conform to the mold that just wasn't my identity. So
yeah, I feel like naturally you want to break the rules as an entrepreneur. You want to do different shit and like you both have said, blaze your own path. And so when you have that just instinct, it's very tough to. I've never worked a corporate job. It's just This is all I know.
Totally. And I think that's the kind of personality it takes. One other little anecdote is there was a speaking event with Mark Andreessen, and I asked him, if every VC has money, And he said something like, the best founders don't take advice. So I was like, well, if every VC is giving out money and the best founders don't take advice, why work with you? And he basically said, being an entrepreneur is synonymous with being crazy. Like a lot of the time, entrepreneurs cannot be successful. The best entrepreneurs, he said, won't be successful in other roles. Like this is it for them. They can't work in a corporate job. They have they're very stubborn, and they're not good employees. And he's like, if you're that kind of person, having somebody at your back makes or breaks your life in a lot of ways. And so when you get sued, when your employees are leaving, when you have any issue that's inevitable in like trying to do something that doesn't exist, because basically like if it doesn't exist right now, there's plenty of reasons and there's so much inertia for why this thing doesn't exist. So it takes somebody that says, I can do it because nobody's ever done it before, or maybe there's some innovation that allows for it to be done, but I'm going to be the one that does it. And there's probably 99 reasons why that's not going to happen. And so this is somebody that believes in the one reason why those 99 aren't true. And that's why the failure rate is so low. But the people that take this on tend to be kind of crazy. And if you're going to take it on, you might as well have people behind your back. And that was his answer. And I actually do believe that VCs aren't about the money. It's about having somebody that can give you an unfair advantage, is what he said.
So when you guys have obviously raised money, I don't know if you want to go into specifics right now, but when you were in the process of doing that, how did you, number one, like get the money that you needed at the valuation you were comfortable with, but also number two, making sure that you chose the right strategic partner?
I think starting off, so I guess thinking about this in terms of kind of the timeline of when we left our job. So I'd left Apple in like the end of 22, and I think Ezra left McKinsey not much later, beginning of 2023. And so
just real quick, was Ohana even an idea at this point, or did you guys just quit with the intention of starting something big?
Ohana was an idea. We knew we wanted to build this, but we basically built it from scratch.
Had anyone tried to solve this problem before too?
So many people.
Yeah.
Everybody and their brother at college says, I pay for rent in the summer, I should sublease it to interns coming to the city. Like literally hundreds of people have tried to solve this problem.
And what did the failures look like? Did someone build out an actual software, go through, some of the steps that you guys have now done?
Definitely people have built the product, and really I think the product is not necessarily what makes or breaks the solution. It's, marketplaces are very tough. And to your question about investors, like that's one thing we really solve for is who's built marketplaces, because it takes a tremendous amount of creativity in the beginning. You have this chicken and egg problem, they call it the cold start problem, where people come to your site to find housing, and if they come to your site and they don't see anything available, they leave. And people list on your site to find people that are looking. And so if they list on your site and nobody is looking, then they leave, right? So you inherently have to fake one side of the market to attract the other, and then you can pick up that fake to pull the rest in. So it takes a tremendous amount of creativity. It's not just about building a website. And like what we've done, and honestly, day in, day out, a lot of the things that we spend our time thinking about is how do we provide anybody that comes to our site with the most options so that they tell all their friends, come to this site. And in time, people will list on our site naturally because this is where the demand is. And we can get into all those like kind of creative solutions.
Yeah, let's do that. What were the first, units that were available for sublet on Ohana?
I mean, how did it start?
Well, so I guess backing up, so our product launched, I think it was March 25th, 2023. And we went to CMU and it was kind of crazy. And then a couple of weeks later, that
was yesterday, actually.
Yeah, it's been just about a year. Yeah. And so.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow, that's good timing, huh?
Yeah, literally a year. That's crazy.
I thought about that. Yeah. So.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks. And so last spring we partnered with a bunch of consulting clubs at schools just to kind of help us with our go-to-market strategy mainly at that school. So, CMU was one of them. We partnered with a bunch of schools in Chicago, UPenn, New York. And so the first 2 weeks of April, we did this college tour. So we, left Pittsburgh, went to Penn State, UPenn, New York. And then the next week we flew to Atlanta, spent 3 days in Chicago, and then went to Michigan. And, at this point we didn't have funding yet. We had a couple of our interviews during that time actually. But so we just had kind of all of these random listings from different cities, kind of like a few here, a few there, and we didn't have a critical mass of like supply or demand in any market. And so that's definitely something we think about a lot. Like, focusing right now, we're very focused on New York. We want to have very high density, a lot of listings. This time of year, there's a ton of demand. So just really getting it right in one market and then translating that playbook to other markets, thereafter.
And I got to take you to like that week Jacob was describing. So basically, we leave Apple and McKinsey. Jacob's parents were a little bit more forgiving. My parents were like, "You're not on our healthcare. You're on your own." And my dad is an immigrant from the Soviet Union, and he was like, "This is not going to fly." So we're like on our own, and we decide, okay, we're going to drive to all these schools. We're going to show up with pizza boxes. We're going to tell these kids about Ohana. They're going to list with us, and then somehow people are going to find these options because they're looking for housing. And so we show up, we had this routine where we would give out pizza, tell people about Ohana, and then we would do a speaking event at the school, and then we would stay with a friend at night. And while we're driving, the product has all these bugs in it because we just released it. So Jacob's like patching up the bugs, and I'm driving between campuses, and then we pull over to the side of the road and we're meeting with a potential investor trying to sell them. I mean, this is 2 weeks of like April where we're doing everything all at once, and it's like nothing's working. And we did get an interview for Neo's accelerator. And so we met with Ollie, and he runs Neo. And honestly, he saw something in us, not because the product was great or not because things were working well, but just because we had built Keeper together before. And he just believed that we could be the ones to figure this out. And through that one conversation, he passed us, put us into the Neo accelerator. We got admitted and got $625K, put into this cohort of 20 other amazing companies, had like a mentor. He introduced us to Spencer Raskoff, the guy who created Zillow. He introduced us to co-founders of Airbnb. I mean, that was like an inflection point. And I think there's an element of luck, but the commitment is what he saw, that we were willing to leave Apple and McKinsey and that we were willing to show up at a different campus every single day. And he's like, yeah, what they're doing right now might be crazy, but over time they'll iterate towards something that works because they're committed. And I think, he was right.
You talk about some of the things that you shouldn't do as an entrepreneur, maybe working a certain job or something, but do you think accelerator programs, it sounds like for you guys, that was really like, all right, this is something that's possible, right? It gave you the hope and the connections and the network and the resources to start building with a foundation. What was that experience like? And would you recommend working, joining and applying for an accelerator?
Yeah. I mean, I think we both tell everybody like Neo changed our lives. And I think YC, of course, is probably the most famous accelerator, but Neo's really unique because they offer a 4-week retreat. So we were in Sun River, Oregon. They rent out this beautiful resort. It's like rural setting, along a gorgeous river. You can see the skies incredibly clearly. Like you can see the Milky Way at night. We're all living in these cabins and we have these bikes and, we have like a co-working room. All of our meals are like outside and catered. All of these incredible like technologists like Scott Forstall, who created the iPhone, the creator of Google Sheets, founders of Tinder, like all these incredible people coming to visit us, not just like lecture us, but, we get to go spend time with them one-on-one, talk about our business, our vision, the problems we're facing. And so there's only 20 companies, right? So that means there's about, 50 other founders there. And so, we had the opportunity and, everybody's in their early 20s and you can really become friends with these people and, like honestly, like they're like lifelong friends. And I think the community you get from Neo, like much more than the money, is really, what is an absolute game changer. So, it was very intense, but we had an incredible time. And I think honestly, there's no other accelerator program out there that's like it.
And I think 2 things about that. One is like we met at summer camp, and then this was summer camp for entrepreneurship, like for founders. So that was cool. And then the other piece is like being an entrepreneur can also be very lonely. And like having a really solid co-founder is very important. And I think the fact that Jacob and I are friends from younger age and have built a company together, our foundation of, like our business experience and like the way we view the world is similar because we've kind of co-developed it. But secondly, like it can be very lonely still because you don't have all the answers. And a lot of the time your employees or your investors will look to you. What's the answer? And like that can be an isolating experience. And to be with other founders that are 25, that have been given a few $100,000 and have the same kind of pressure on their back, like I need to figure this out, is really great to not feel alone.
And it's also curated, so it's not just like, all right, these are a bunch of random people that like may or may not be like smart, but like no, the people that run that and the very tenured entrepreneurs, founders with multiple exits probably under their belt, right? They chose everyone for a reason. So you're in this just amazing group of that's small, tight knit, and get to share the similar experience with them. So that's awesome.
How do you guys find yourselves learning from, you mentioned some of the most famous founders in the world, whether it's the iPhone or Tinder or Zillow. Like, how do you learn from people who are successful but in very different industries? Because you guys are in, real estate and AI.
Yeah.
How are you learning from the other software companies out there, or just, whatever anybody else in that cohort's doing? How do you skate your own wing but still learn from them?
I think that's a very good question, and honestly something that I don't know if we really explicitly think about it. The way that I would put that now is, yes, we're building something different than Spencer, who built Zillow. But the lesson from Zillow is that he didn't have any inventory either, and he didn't have any demand. So he had this chicken and egg problem. And what him and his team did, and somebody else we met with on their team, who's the current? Rich Barton.
Yeah.
We also met with Rich Barton, where they created what's called network independent value, which is what we often think about. We have to solve the same problem. Like, why are people going to come to your site even if you don't have what they're looking for, right? So they did something called the Zestimate, where when you go onto Zillow, you see what your house is worth, what your ex-girlfriend's house is worth, what your parents' house is worth, and that created a frenzy. So they didn't have any ability to monetize their listings, but they took a map of the United States and they put a price tag on every roof, and they had millions of users overnight. And then 3 years later, they found a way to monetize it. So we did something somewhat similar in New York City, where if you were looking for a sublet in New York, you used to have to be in 10 different Facebook groups. You'd have these 10 tabs open of what's available. Maybe you'd have Craigslist, you'd have WhatsApp, you'd have Instagram. Like, there's all these disparate housing groups. We built this tool that consolidates them all into one. And we take this unstructured data, feed it into a ChatGPT prompt, structure it into our database so that you can come to Ohana, you can filter for exactly what you're looking for, and you'll see the results from 20 other sites. And in addition to that, we verify hosts that list with us natively. So if you want to find somebody that's not going to scam you, the best option is you come to Ohana, you'll see all of our verified listings, and then you'll see a complete picture of what's available outside of it. And that's what's called network independent value. We scraped the internet, we cleaned it for you, you come to us, you'll see what's available, and then you go to where it's available. And over time, as more people are coming to us, we'll have more listings and you'll just stay on platform. So that was one idea that we implemented and that has finally started to work. And then other things too, like in New York City, there's this big opportunity because Airbnb is no longer allowed for less than 30 days, something called Local Law 18. And so these former Airbnb hosts, they can only rent for 30 days or longer, which means that their tenants have tenants' rights. It means it's very hard to evict them. So on Airbnb, you could book right away. And people come in, and like hosts are now taking their listings off Airbnb. They went from 10,000 listings to 1,000 because essentially anybody could come into your apartment and squat and stay there, and then they're not paying rent, and it's very hard to evict them. So we built a way for like hosts to screen the guests, and we partner with employers where we help their interns find housing by giving them access to the search tool. And in exchange, we have really high quality demand because these people are only here for the summer. They're not going to squat. And we can show you their offer letter, and they came from Wells Fargo or Oracle. And essentially the hosts love it. So like these are the kind of creative things that we had to iterate through. And it's not the same thing Zillow did, but the spirit of it, it delivers a similar result. What would you say, Jacob? Anything you'd add?
I just think people that have built marketplaces are incredibly challenging businesses. I think honestly, most people that try to build a marketplace are generally naive to it. So yeah, I think just any investor or mentor that's built a marketplace and gets the struggle is incredibly valuable. But they also say, like, if you get it right, it's kind of like a winner take all, result. So if you are able to get it right, it can be like extremely lucrative, but it's just incredibly competitive and very challenging to, bridge this chicken and egg problem.
Is this something that you knew like you needed to solve before you partnered and raised money from the founder of Zillow, or did he kind of like shine a light on that and then it was a problem you solved after the fact?
We knew we needed to solve it. At that point, we were, I think, naive to start out, but we had
As most people would be, right?
yeah. And I think you kind of need to be, because like if you know how hard this is going to be,
You're not gonna
you
do
might
it.
not do it. But what we did well was we communicated the problem and we convinced people to give us money, and then you go from being unemployed to being an entrepreneur, where you're like, okay, we've been given this money, we can solve this problem, and we have time, right? Like we have enough time to iterate through different ideas. And then basically this was all before Neo, where we were like, the product wasn't working, but we knew we had funding. And then at Neo, I would say we were like, here's why it's not working. We need to just focus on New York because there's so much demand in New York that if we can get the listings, we can fill them. So that solves one half of the chicken and egg problem. Okay, then how do you get the listings? Okay, well, we're gonna put all the listings that are already available onto our site, and then gradually over time, people will realize, okay, this is where people are searching, I'm gonna list here. And it turned out to be true. And then we had to build teams at NYU and Columbia because those students structurally don't need their apartment in the summer, so they can list it with us. And now we're partnering with Airbnb hosts and other things. So like, I'd say by the time we met Spencer, we knew what problems we had to solve. And Neo was really good about making sure that we were ready to raise. Like they spent a ton of time prepping us for what they call demo day, which is like when they invite a whole bunch of investors out at the end of the accelerator program. Yeah.
What was Spencer's original initial reaction when you first met him or brought the idea to him?
He didn't like it, and honestly, like I'm actually
Why
proud of
why
that.
not?
What's it like? Sorry to interrupt, but he's basically the Kleenex name of real estate.
real estate,
Like
exactly.
Zillow is the real estate site.
Yes.
So what happens when you get discouraging news like that?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm proud of this, that he basically said no to us at first. And he was very generous, even to get on the phone with us and to talk to us and to really give it some thought. He comes from a world where Zillow is built off of home buying, which is the biggest chunk of real estate, right? Like if you're going to do residential real estate, home buying is the big chunk. And then their second important business is renting. And then way down the line, not even on their priority list, is subleasing. But what we knew that maybe he didn't fully appreciate was that Airbnb has, let's say revenue of, I think it's about $10 billion a year, and their market cap is $100 billion. So they're valued at a 10x multiple. Whereas Zillow has, I think it was their market cap was around 10 billion and their revenue was 1 billion. I think their market cap was 4x. So Airbnb has a higher market cap. And that's because Zillow sells leads, which earn them about $25, in a good case. And Airbnb processes payments. And so the business that we were building was completely different. Yes, the total TAM is smaller, but the ticket size for each of these transactions is a lot higher. And I think we knew that. And then secondly, we had just experienced a problem, and he had been out of college for decades. He wasn't a young person that would ever consider subleasing, but there's thousands of people on Facebook and Craigslist looking for this. So I think we just had enough confidence that we know what we're talking about, and not everyone's going to believe in you right away, but even if they don't believe in the idea, they can come around because they believe in you. And that was important.
Did he just go to you guys look, I hate to tell you, but this is not as big as you think. Maybe you should focus on something else? Or was he maybe if you restructure it, we can talk again?
He's like, here's my concerns. And then we're like, okay, don't even invest. Just take our advisory shares. And then he's like, okay, but I still have concerns. And then we had Ollie, who invested and really believed in us, go to him and say, give these guys a chance. There's something real here. I back them fully. Give these guys a chance. And then Spencer was like, okay, let's talk again. And we're like, can we come to your house? And so we were in San Diego at the time, but we would have flown out there and just said we're in town. And we drive up to his house. He's like, okay, I'll meet with you. And we sit down with him and he tells us about his concerns. And we're just like, no, we're still going to do it. I hear those concerns. Here's how we would address them. He's like, well, I don't think I have a choice, but I'm gonna take the advisory shares and we'll meet with you every month and we'll talk about this. And honestly, the time is really more valuable than the money. We already have more money than we know exactly what to do with, but being able to meet with somebody that's built something very similar before and has a good grasp on the space and has legitimate concerns is really valuable. And so that's what I would say. And he came around, but you need somebody to believe in you too. You have to believe in yourself, but because Ollie was our champion and he said, these guys are worth it, that's how we were able to get him on board.
Do you guys have any objective failures? Because I know that a lot of people kind of, look from the outside in and they see like these two kids from, Pittsburgh. You guys grew up together. You had the opportunity to go to school. You got lucky on your first business, they might say, with Keeper. You go to your jobs, you realize, that's not for you. You start up Ohana and you have some pretty immediate success. Like, are there any failures that have?
That did not go right.
But so people looking in, they think that entrepreneurship is, very easy, and that you guys, might have just gotten lucky. What are some problems that you guys solved to, to show all the haters that it's not all sunshine and rainbows? Or is it really that easy, Jacob?
There's a ton of pressure. There's tremendous pressure, and we're laughing because today's been a challenging day. But they've given us this opportunity, and right now is really our moment. It's a really critical moment in the development of the business where, we've been given all this money. We've been at this for over a year now. I think this is, somewhat seasonal business, right? It's the end of March, headed into April. People are looking for their, specifically interns are looking for their summer housing. And, we need to at least demonstrate that we can execute now, and that people, that our product provides value and people are willing to pay through us, and, landlords love us, and all, it's really like we need to prove that this business can be sustainable and that there really is a business here. And especially, when you've been rejected so many times, and even when, mentors like Spencer of ours are, somewhat skeptical, there's tremendous pressure to prove ourselves. And it's incredibly hard. There's a lot to manage. There's, product wise, there's endless things to be improved, and really day to day, it's mainly just us full time, right? So there's more to do than hours in the day. We work 7 days a week, we work late at night. And, just honestly, like, as I sit here now, like, honestly, I feel stressed, and I feel like we're not doing enough. We need to be more focused. We need to work harder. And, there's just, it's a real roller coaster. And it's, from the outside, maybe it looks like we're successful, but there's a lot still to be proven. And I think we feel like a very kind of like existential pressure that we need to make this work. And I think, I don't know, a lot of people might look at entrepreneurs and be like, oh, like they have so much money, and do they really deserve it? But like some of these days are really tough.
It's hard out here when you raise. No, I completely echo what Jacob has said. And it's actually funny when people ask that question, like, oh, did you just get lucky? Because
I didn't mean it in a derogatory way at all. I meant for everybody else that's kind of onlooking to Ohana.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right to ask, because it's like, oh, things just seem to work out. But day in, day out, we feel like we are in a constant state of failure. Like, it is, like, seriously, we wake up in the morning and there's fires to put out, and there's so many reasons why, things aren't working. And so you have these little wins, and you really have to celebrate the little wins and like make them big wins. And there's like a paradox to being successful. You have to simultaneously be so anxious of failure that you do everything you can to succeed, but at the same time believe that you will be successful. Right? So you have to be so cognizant of all the reasons you can fail and believe that you're going to succeed. And I think that's our life in a nutshell, is like we are simultaneously going to build a multi-billion-dollar business, and there's so many problems, and it's going to die tomorrow because of X, Y, and Z. And I think it's like hard to understand if you've only had a regular job where you know exactly what you need to do. So it's a roller coaster. There's really high highs, there's really low lows, but like honestly, we have each other, and it's a lot of fun. And even if it doesn't work out, I do not regret a single second of it. And you also have to just be very okay with failure. Like as a whole, we're very okay with failure because we take this risk. But even the day in, day out, like we get told no all the time.
I was thinking about this the other day too, like a lot recently actually. It's like if you look at business or life or anything, like almost like a video game where you're building up and you have to kind of cross that checkpoint. And then like it might take you a couple of times to beat that next boss, which is like your next objective, your next, accomplishment to get to the next step that's higher. But as long as you put those like checkpoints in place, that you fall back a little bit, you fail a little bit, but you don't come crashing down to the beginning. You're still over time progressing and eventually like building what
Absolutely.
you set out to do.
Absolutely.
And when you're in that moment, it's very tough because all you see is the failure. All you see is like, this is not working. This is not working. And then when it works, you're kind of like, oh, maybe, I guess I did something right.
Exactly. It's not something easy to do in general. It's very, very hard to do it alone. And so, even we bring people onto the team and it doesn't work out, at least we still have each other, and like, that's one thing I would just say, like, when you do have a co-founder, trust and like knowing that you guys have each other's back is the most important thing. And I feel very lucky, to be working with Jacob. I think we have a good dynamic, and it's hard, but we have each other.
So what was the catalyst that like ultimately made Steven invest into
Spencer?
What was
So
what was the catalyst
he
that
just
ultimately
took our
made?
advisory shares.
So he hasn't invested yet.
He hasn't put money in, but he's put time in. And for somebody that's
where's the other 600,000 from then? Because you've raised 1.2, you got 625 to start.
So yeah, exactly. So we raised 625 to start, and then we raised another 500 from the co-founder of Groupon. He has a VC firm called Lightbank, and then we had a couple other angel investors to close it up. So we had Surabhi Gupta, who led engineering at Airbnb, and she's an angel investor. And then we had this guy who runs another real estate payments platform called CastlePay, and they invested. Spencer put time in, which, to be totally honest with you, we'd rather have. Like, 15K wouldn't make or break our business. But if we could talk to Spencer once a month and be like, hey, here's what's going on, what would you do? Or who can you connect us with? Like, I emailed him a couple days ago. He connected us with somebody that could actually help with like social media marketing strategies, because he sees a lot. He's also still an investor. Yeah, and that's basically the long story short.
What you talk about wearing like many hats, like you were just talking about. What are some of like the biggest like memories or like stories of like a crazy thing you've had to do that as a founder probably shouldn't, but you just have to get down on your hands and knees and take care of business?
I think one of the things we do a lot is like we'll go to these campuses and we'll give out donuts. We went to like UC Berkeley, for example, and we ordered 500 Krispy Kreme donuts and had like a team of something like 30 students helping us hand them out and raise awareness. And, whether it's donuts or pizza, like we've probably given out thousands of slices of pizza. So I don't know, we leave these like kind of, I guess, prestigious jobs, and then, next thing you know, we're out on the streets.
Handing out donuts.
But one other funny story. So we had a launch party at NYU, I think 2 weeks ago now. And we did this thing where we put like a bed in the club. So we got like a bed frame and a bed and, a custom blanket and all this stuff. And it's like at the end of the night, it was just me and this one kid from our NYU team. And we have to like take this bed. So we're like taking out this bed and like putting it on the street. And, it's like, how did this become my life? So what else?
Another time where we were at CMU doing like a tabling event to raise awareness for Ohana. And I bring my dog, my bulldog, my parents' bulldog, and she refuses to walk.
This is our launch day, by the way. Like, this is like the first day the website's live. We're excited but stressed, and waiting for Ezra.
She's heavy. She's like at least 100 pounds, and I'm like, they're waiting for me, and the pizza's there, and all this stuff.
So yeah, Ezra calls me. She's like, Ezra's like, the dog, like she won't walk. I'm like, what do you mean she won't walk? I'm like, she's not moving. And so I have to go like find Ezra and be like, this is a really heavy dog. Like we both like together trying to carry this dog. And
her name is Mush. And two hands, like I got the head, Jacob's got the tails, and we're carrying her. But she then stays for the tabling event, and I will say she drew a crowd. Like people came, they pet her. It was worth it. But we haven't given her shares. We haven't given her shares yet.
That's awesome. Yeah, dogs are good marketing, I feel like.
Yeah.
Recently, we had a kid on our TikTok or on our podcast, and he's like kind of famous in Boston because he's got a really cute like golden wiener dog, and that dog is named Kirkland, like Costco.
Oh,
he's
nice.
got a little Instagram right now.
He's got an
Instagram. He's got an Instagram now too, and they're growing like that. So dogs are great marketing.
That's cool.
So like, what's next, guys? Like, what's the next hurdle that you have to overcome? It seems like that you have the marketplace built out online. You have you have a supply and a demand now. You solved the chicken and the egg problem. What's next for you?
I think 100 transactions 100 transactions is really what our site is set on.
What number are you at right now, if you don't mind sharing?
We have matched over 800 people since we started, but we just launched payments at the end of February. So we've only had payments and sublease facilitation live for roughly like 4 weeks, and we're at about 20. And so we've learned a lot in these 4 weeks. Like, we used to not talk to the customers, like they would match and then they would go off on their own. Now we facilitate calls between the two of them. We get a ton of feedback on, like, how did you find your apartment? How did you hear about us? How did, what's the sublease process like? We're very intimately involved in these transactions. And this is like, to go from 0 to 1 transaction is a huge leap, because you had nothing and then you had somebody list with you expecting somebody to come see their listing and take the apartment. Somebody search with you expecting to find what they're looking for, and then pay through you because you give them a reason to stay on platform. And like, that was a big feat, going from 0 to 1. And so we did that. And honestly, it sounds like nothing. Probably made a couple $100, but that was huge. And then to go from 0 to 2, go to 0 to 10 is another feat. But going from 0 to 100 is like, okay, how could we go from 0 to 1,000 and 0 to 2,000, which is when this business starts generating $1 million of free cash flow at 2,000 transactions. And I think we're going to get the answers in 0 to 100. And we're in the middle of it right now. Like, we've had over 65 meetings between supply and demand in the last month. Around 20 of those meetings have converted to subleases, and I think more still will. And then there's plenty of things that'll, we're unlocking more supply day in, day out. We're partnering with more employers to bring more people to the platform. So I think once we can go from 0 to 100, we'll get a clear sense of how to go from 0 to 1,000.
And then, are you guys making money? Like, if you like my apartment in Boston, you sublet my apartment in Boston, is Ohana making a percentage on every transaction, or how does that work?
Yeah, so our pricing model is really simple. We charge 5% from the hosts. So if you list with us, you basically can say, okay, I want to make $1,000 a month, and then we'll increase it by 5%, and it's as simple as that. And we try to keep it relatively low, honestly, just so people pay with us. And right now we're not as concerned about like maximizing our profits. We just want to build the best product and continue to grow awareness for Ohana.
For reference, like, what is Airbnb and like other similar platforms?
Yeah, Airbnb is variable. I think they charge 3% on the host side, but then they charge up to 14% on the guest side. But a big challenge, honestly, with pricing is like negotiation. So with Airbnb has asymmetry of information, meaning, when you pay exactly how much Airbnb gets and how much the host gets, right? So, and there's no negotiation. So that's something we still need to work on, kind of like taking out negotiation from our process. One of the challenges with subleases is because it's not just like a weekend trip. You're going somewhere for maybe 3 months. You want to feel out, is this legit? So, people do feel more comfortable booking a sublease after, they, a host and guest talk with each other. And so there's maybe a little bit of a negotiation inherent with that. So, I'm sure our pricing model will
Yeah, right now it's just customer acquisition on both sides.
Yeah.
Building out the data too and learning from that and going from there.
And the reason people stay on platform is because, first of all, it's hard to find. Like, I'm going to New York. How do I find a place that's available for basically the exact amount of time I need? I don't want to pay for a hotel for a month. I want to find like a sublet, and I want to live either with other guys or on my own in a neighborhood I like. So we make that pretty easy to find. And then secondly is like, I don't want to get scammed. I could Venmo somebody on Craigslist a couple $1,000s and then show up and there's nothing there and I have no recourse. Or I could go through Ohana, they introduce me to the host, walk me through how payments work. I put my security deposit down on Ohana, and the host only gets paid once they move in and confirm everything's okay. I'm there for the rest of my stay. The process is really clean. And then I move out, I get my security deposit back. Or if you're a host and somebody damages your apartment, you sublet to them, you have no recourse. But at least on Ohana, you have a security deposit, you have a platform that has your back. And that's really the value. Like, beyond finding somebody, facilitating the transaction, we take a lot of the risk out.
So to build up to the user base that is ideal for you guys, is it really college students and that summer market that you think you can really capitalize and grow into? Or are there other things like the digital nomads and other industries and people that are doing other, older, young, probably not younger, but older maybe, that you think you could really dive into as well?
I think college students, structurally need this. They pay for housing they don't need. So it's a great place to start. And they also have network effects where if you really become a good solution on a campus, then you can, have like a critical mass and people talk about it and they'll use it year over year. But really, I think the opportunity is like you're moving to a new city. So you're moving to Boston, you're moving to New York, you're moving to San Francisco. It's an expensive experience. And you don't want to sign a 12-month lease right away because you're not there yet. You have to pay a broker. It's extremely expensive, and then furnish the apartment. And so I think our big opportunity is like to transition into a new city. So you would start with a sublet on Ohana for 30 days or longer. You'd discover what neighborhood you like. You'd maybe you'd be in the city to figure out what your housing options are, and then you could sign a 12-month lease. And I think that's a very needed service. I think that's why most people use these Facebook groups right now. And they end up not finding what they're looking for or paying an exorbitant amount on Airbnb.
The last money you raised was at a $10 million evaluation. How are you going to get from 10 to 100?
How are we going to do it, Jacob?
Yeah, I think, as soon as you kind of can prove product market fit, I think the game really changes. So like Ezra was saying, like our goal of 100 transactions and then really getting that up to probably around the 2,000 transaction mark and proving, right now we have to prove that we can execute and that there's like, something to this. But then the next question is this seasonal, right? So great, you had a fantastic summer, but, is this just a summer business or can you make this more year round? And so that's why, we're thinking of maybe, travel nurses and other people that, travel for work for extended periods of time.
Would you guys ever consider like to become a multi-billion-dollar company? Would you ever own apartments of your own kind of for short-term rentals? Or is that not really something that you've really want to do?
It's an excellent question because there's other companies like Blue Ground, Sonder, June Homes that have done exactly that. And it's basically, it comes down to the question of like inventory risk. Like, do you want to take inventory risk? Where I take the apartment, I have the supply, but if I can't fill it, I'm stuck paying the landlord or paying whoever for that inventory. And the short answer is no. Like, the beauty of marketplaces is that there's a reason to pay through the marketplace and there's zero marginal costs. There's zero transaction costs. And that's what we're delivering now. We're providing a service. It's a digital service. It's sublease facilitation. It takes a lot of effort to get people onto the site, but the product itself is free to us. And I think the learning, Sonder is a company where they did that. They took a lot of inventory risk and they tried to fill this gap in the middle of the housing market. And then interest rates changed. Their costs went up. Demand went down for a variety of reasons, COVID and others. And the business is not sustainable. But Airbnb was able to ride that storm. So they were able to go through COVID and to go through these interest rate changes. And there was new inventory that came onto the platform, and they took no risk for the inventory that didn't fill. And I think Airbnb and Uber are really important learnings. They didn't have their own cars and they didn't build their own houses. But that's the beauty of these software businesses.
I think one of those things too, like, I don't know if it was Sonder or it was maybe like
WeWork is a great example too.
Yeah. So like the price also goes up because they have to account for the unrented days and potentially months, right? And then also the convenience. So like here where you're basically helping college students that their apartment's going to sit empty for 3 months, or they're going to have to go through all this work to find some tenant, it's kind of gray area, Venmo payments, you're able to keep the prices down where they should be or as close to that as possible.
Yeah. It's, yeah, no, definitely. And it's hard to convince investors that we were able to fill all these units that we paid for, but don't worry, one day it's going to be not our units. It's a lot easier to convince investors like, we were able to get people to list their apartments with us and people to search here, and we didn't have to, furnish any units.
That's great. Is there anything else that you guys want to add, or anything else that we missed about the journey?
I think it's like what I would say to anybody that's interested in being an entrepreneur is if you have just like a deep, deep desire to solve a problem, and you have to really genuinely want to solve that problem, because it's not like a glamorous lifestyle. It is not like you're going to enjoy, it's going to be like trudging through the mud. And there will be breakthroughs. Like if you raise money, like, if you are able to like build the business, like then it can become a glamorous lifestyle. But you have to genuinely want to solve the problem. more so than you want to have comfort and luxury and spare time, and the sacrifices need to be made too. Like, you know, this past year, my girlfriend went through cancer, and we was in chemo and in and out of surgeries, and it's really hard to have life and try to breathe life into this thing. So I just think you have to actually want to solve a problem, and don't do it for making money, because it's not a great way to make money.
Great way to close it out. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. We wish you all the success.
Thank you.
Months, years,
Thank
whatever
you.
it is.
Yeah, when Miley's is up, I'm fucking hopping on the
We'll help you.